Pies prove they're more than just making up the numbers, and the Saints weather an almighty storm to keep their dream alive. All that and more to come from the finals so far here on the round so far. But Kane Corns, an amazing first week of finals, the closest in history, and they kept the best till last. An amazing win from the Pies, and they set up a semi-final berth against Geelong.
Just how good was it? Congratulations to the AFL and the players for putting on one of the best first weeks of finals, if not the best we've ever seen. So in a strange season, this was such a reward for the fans. And this game here was just as good. And apologies to Collingwood, I did give them no chance to win this with the challenges that they were facing on this ground, the quarantine, all of that, the West Coast Stars. These are the final minutes we're seeing here. And you're going to see one of the great smothers we've ever seen in a final, and that's Taylor Adams. 30 seconds on the clock as Kelly marks the ball there. And this spoil from Taylor Adams, that smother, I should say, saved the day. And from there, class from Pendlebury. And that was the win. So what a performance it was. It's as good a finals win as I can remember from a pretty proud footy club.
Brody Mychek kicked 2 goals in the last quarter. He was quiet. As you said, Taylor Adams was massive. Adam Treloar back after a series of injuries this year. He was huge, 25 disposals. Gee, the Pies, they went up against all odds, Kane. Do you give them a hope now against Geelong? Because you didn't give them much going into this one against the Eagles.
I'm not going to make that mistake again. So Geelong will be waiting, and it's hopefully just as good. But yeah, I'm not going to say that because they're good players, were in really good form, and they held firm defensively. Like, they were so hard to score against, other than from stoppages, which we'll get to. 13-7 entries in the last quarter, and they just held up so well. They defended like their life depended on it, which it did, and their season did. So they're tough to score against. They're hard to play against. They're good players. They're back in form. They've almost got a full complement running into some good match fitness. So, they'll give themselves a chance for sure.
It's their highest score since round 3 this year as well. And we all raised our eyebrows when they went tall in the selection. Darcy Cameron to join Mason Cox. I know you've been strong against Mason Cox being in this side this year and saying they should go smaller. But these two took 7 contested marks between them and proved a lot of us wrong.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do next week. Like, really slippery conditions at the Gabba, which they will be next week when they do take on Geelong. So can they go with the 3 talls? But tonight, it worked. Well, it worked in the first quarter for this man. I mean, he's on fire. He kicked 3 goals in the first half of the first quarter. And as you said, 7 contested marks between those two, and some big responsibility for Cameron, which we'll get to in the rucks as well. But they stood up, and I just think the influence of the bigger player in these finals so far, particularly the ruckman across the 4 games, has been so significant and has been a real weapon for the winner of each of the 4 finals, and that was the case again tonight. It was a great performance once again from a man who's becoming a final specialist.
And the Pies took their chances, kicked 8 straight from set shots. The Eagles kicked 8-5 and left a few in the bank, I guess, and that might have cost them in the end. You spoke about the rucks. We want to take you back to the start of the second half. Third quarter, no Brodie Grundy in that centre bounce.
Fascinated by this. Yeah, he's got 7 years to go on a $7-ish million contract, and he starts the second quarter of a big final on the bench. So the Eagles kicking a goal from that first stoppage, first centre bounce. They kicked 5 goals from centre bounces tonight. It's been such a weapon for them all year. And then we cut away to Brodie Grundy sitting on the bench. And what happens at the start of the fourth quarter? All important. Collingwood leading by 10 points. He's in there again. Cameron up against Nat Nui, and the Eagles go down and score a pretty quick goal, as quick as it gets, to start the last quarter, and Brodie Grundy stays there. So a lot of people will speculate that he's got an injury. He didn't look injured in the dying stage of this game, where he took 2 big contested marks late, and that's the all-important last centre bounce there, where Collingwood actually got the better of Nat Nui without Brodie Grundy in the ruck. And look at that, minute to go, West Coast trailing by a point, and who's in there again? It's Cameron and not Grundy. So you would speculate that there's an injury, but as I said, in the last stages, Brodie Grundy did take 2 contested marks down the line. Perhaps he's just not in great form.
He only played 63% of the game time tonight, Brodie Grundy, 88 on average for the season. So I'm sure we're going to learn a bit more of that as the season wears on, and potentially was carrying an injury at the end of the year. I know you said he's been in poor form for much of the second half of the year. We love the game of Braden Maynard up against Liam Ryan. These two always have a great battle. Who do you think got the points?
Well, I thought Maynard should have been an All-Australian, and we just don't get one-on-one matchups very often in modern footy. And I love Braden Maynard as a player because he puts his hand up for the tough job every week, and he takes the opposition's best small or medium forward. And a bit of flair from Ryan. You'd think that Maynard got the last laugh with that one, and the footy gods had to say there. I thought it was I thought Ryan with his 16 disposals, kicking an important goal, was influential. But once again, Maynard is just almost the heart and soul of this Collingwood side, and it was just so good to see a one-on-one matchup. And next week, if we cast our eye forward, when Patrick Dangerfield goes forward, you would think Maynard would take the honours of playing on him, which is another matchup worth the price of admission.
Another great job tonight from Levi Greenwood. Kept Tim Kelly to 2 clearances and 12 disposals for the whole night. So a great job from Greenwood. Just a word on the Eagles. They've got to quarantine now for 14 days because the Pies are deemed a dirty team. They haven't quarantined for the full length of 2 weeks. So a full 14 days now for the Eagles. Is it a wasted season given they were flag favourites for parts of the second half of the year?
We'd have to say yes. I mean, some of their players are getting on a bit. The skipper Hearn's getting on, Nat Nui's getting on. Even the likes of Andrew Gaff, I know he's got a long time to go. Shuey's had some issues with his body and he's getting older, as is McGovern and a number of others. So they're right in the sweet spot. Kennedy's another one who was inaccurate tonight, but still had a big influence on the game. So you get Kelly in for a reason. You give up a lot to get him. You're really right in that spot to win another premiership, and they failed on that. I thought they took too many underdone players into the final. Now it's a catch-22. You got names like McGovern and Shuey and Sheed that haven't played much footy but are ready to go. You probably have to pick them. But even Josh Kennedy was cramping up in his hammy towards the back end of that third quarter. I thought that's a bit of a warning sign. So they were just out on their feet in the end.
All right, big watch on the Eagles going into next year. The Saints, they're still alive. They had to do it the hard way, led by 23 points with 9 minutes to play. Gee, the Dogs came hard at the Gabba.
Kicked 4-1 in the last quarter, didn't they? And if there was that extra or normal time that we would usually get in a normal home and away season, you'd love to know what would have happened. But Saints were good enough to hold on under an absolute barrage. Like, all the numbers were just going the Dogs' way, and they came really hard late, inaccurate as well at times, and missed some crucial opportunities, particularly in the third quarter. Hunter missed a really crucial one, as did Bailey Smith as well. But they did come. Wallace gets his free kick for a push in the back, and he goes back and he misses as well. So as we spoke about, crucial misses probably were the difference in the game.
You look at some of these last quarter numbers: 18 contested possessions, 19 grambles, 13 more inside 50s for the Dogs. Kane, they still haven't won a final now since that flag in 2016.
Yeah, he's been there for a while, Luke Beveridge, and he's only won a final in one of the 6 years that he's been there for. And as you said, they are a 50-50 side since 2016. You look at their home and away record, it's about 50-50 or just a touch under that. So he's not building an enviable record, Luke Beveridge, and the scenes there for the Saints, got to give them credit. They were so strong in the air today, and that was stood out. Their rucks were enormous. We'll get to that in a second, but I think just early on, they just wanted it more, and they were the harder and tougher and best and most organised side.
1-7 now for the Dogs this year against top 8 teams, so they'll be left to rue that record. We'll go to our Saturday star next. Jaron Geary, Kane, 2 goals, took 4 contested marks in the front half. He did a job on Caleb Daniel and really gave the Dogs back something to think about.
Heart and soul, isn't he? I mean, what a great captain he has been. Some would question the decision to give him the captaincy, but I think he's done a really good job. And to stand up in an unusual role that he played, like he hasn't played forward much in his career at all. I know he's done it at times with that defensive role, but I love it when the opposition have a plan against one of the opposition's All-Australians and best players. And that was the plan. You can see Geary expose what is Caleb Daniel's biggest weakness, and we know that. But not many teams have gone after him and tried to do that. Geary did it, and he was good enough and he was smart enough to get off at the right time and hit the scoreboard when he had the opportunity. So great coaching from Brett Ratton and his team to identify that as a matchup, and well executed by Jaron Geary, who's the Saturday star. Big
watch to see if he goes to Vlosten or Grimes next week and the Saints take on the Tigers. We mentioned the contested marks. He took 4 of 21 for the Saints, the highest contested mark tally of any team this year. Do you think the Dogs missed a beat at selection?
Well, they were just outdone in the air. Just the difference in the contribution of St Kilda's tools as opposed to the Dogs. So English, Bruce and Norton. I know Norton had some moments late that we saw, but really ineffective for the first 3 quarters. And we're just seeing the amount of intercept marks, not only the contested marks, 21, which was a season high for the Saints, but the intercept marks as well was just something else. So Poor execution from the Dogs and excellent defensive structures from St Kilda. And this kid here, well, Ryder was terrific as well. We'll get to him in a sec. But Max King is going to be something else. Like, for him to do that in a final and take his 4 contested marks was a coming of age performance from a second-year player.
And the irony was that the Saints moved out Josh Bruce to give Max King more game time and to take that responsibility, and that's what he did today, and had Josh Bruce's had his number covered today. You spoke about Paddy Ryder. He was phenomenal today against Tim English, but in the dying stages, Kane, just his left hamstring. It's a big blow going into the Tigers next week.
Yeah, it's a real shame, isn't it? It's been their biggest weapon, hasn't it? I mean, they kicked 7 stoppage goals in round 18. He was the best player on the ground by a mile today, I thought, Paddy Ryder. And to do that in the last minute or so of the game is a huge blow. So that'll work Richmond over next week with these 2 rucks. Now, luckily for them, they've got a very good young ruckman who, when he has been tasked to play alone, has done a great job, and he'll really take it to Nankervis next week. But Ryder's been their real X factor, and what he's shown is that these 2 can work in tandem, and Ryder once again went forward and kicked goals today. So a massive blow, and probably the one player, if you could pick, that Richmond didn't want to be there was Paddy Ryder, and now he's not going to be there.
The Saints will take heart. Rowan Marshall did the job against Nank one-on-one back in round 4 when the Saints got the win. So they'll be hoping that history repeats itself from that. Ben Long, Kane, he's got a bit of a nervous wait tonight. This bump, he's very, very lucky that Jack McRae got up and played on the game.
He is lucky. The replay doesn't look great, does it? And you're the expert on this, Mitch. I mean, the contact's going to be the crucial thing here, and McRae did get up and contributed and wasn't concussed. So that will save him, but it's not the first time he's been in this situation this year.
If that's low impact, it's a fine. If it's medium impact, it's a week. The thing that will save him is he played on and he got contact with the shoulder, which the Saints will be able to argue if it does go to the tribunal. So a big watch on whether Ben Long is playing next week. The Lions, they've broken the hoodoo, 15 games against Richmond going in, and the Lions are into their first preliminary final since 2004. And dare I say it, they kicked a few Richmond-like goals at this ground level in the front half.
Honestly, it was a joy to watch, wasn't it? I mean, their small did so much damage, and if he's not the most watchable player in the game, and everyone's favouring if you don't support Brisbane, I don't know who is, but that one there, we're going to see Grimes fly when he probably didn't need to, but he's so used to, and Brisbane were able to expose them on the ground. So they just didn't allow Richmond's defensive structure to set up like they have for the last 3 years. That's been their real strength. It was, if they had to kick it along the ground, they did that, and their forwards were hungry. The amount of ground ball forward 50 wins that Brisbane had was almost Richmond-like. And I was watching them thinking, gee, this forward pressure, the contribution of their smalls and their ability to hit the scoreboard is such a Richmond game style. And on the night, Brisbane held firm under siege in that second quarter, and then went bang. And it was, as you said, it was a real coming-of-age performance, and really has them in the box seat. Like, they really should be favourites to win the grand final now and to win this premiership. They don't need to leave the Gabba. The grand final is played there. Got a full bill of health. Harris Andrews is back. So for me, they're right now the premiership favourites.
The Lions will play the winner of Geelong and Collingwood in that preliminary final. As for the Tigers, Damien Hardwick was ropeable after the game due to their ill discipline. It starts here with Daniel Rich given all the time in the world to kick the first goal of the game.
It's amazing. Just keep your eyes on Rich, just hanging around. Look how long he is there for. He's the most damaging kick from outside 50 almost in the AFL. And Richmond don't even bother going and picking him up. This is the first 30 seconds of the game. So don't tell me there's fatigue or a lack of concentration in this. And that was the first warning sign for the Tigers. We saw 4 50-metre penalties. This one, once again, from Bolton. He was on the wrong end of 2 of them. That goes down to the Big O. He kicks another goal from an ill-disciplined decision from Richmond, and they genuinely have no one else to blame. This is a double 50. So Bolton again kicks the ball away when the decision has been paid. You see Pickett up there, knock over Zorko. This goes down for a brilliant goal from Lockie Neal. He's been working hard on driving with his legs and hitting the scoreboard and kicking goals. That was a big moment just on the stroke of half-time, and even decisions from some of the best we've ever seen. Dustin Martin's decision to have a shot there. He's got 2 players, Castagna, I think it's Rewalt in the goal square, that would have been better options. So I know they've had their discipline issues off-field this year, and some could link the two. I just think they were really off their game from a concentration standpoint on Friday night.
There was a carbon copy of their on-field discipline from that Port Adelaide game earlier this year. The other thing that Damien Hardwick pointed out post-game was the impact of the Brisbane defenders to spoil with distance. Harris Andrews, they brought him back early from that hamstring. Kane, he had a big impact. Some of these spoils set up a fair attacking display for the Lions.
Well, they had 11 spoils, and the next best on the ground was 4. So he did. He was able to clear the ball and clear the area. I know Damien Hardwick pointed to that in his press conference after the game, but you wonder why Richmond's smalls weren't able to have the influence that Brisbane's did. When some of Brisbane's balls were dropping just at the feet, this is why. Like these spoils are going 25, 30 metres, and it completely gets the Richmond smalls offside. And it wasn't just Andrews that did it. It was whoever was tasked. I mean, the smallest defender they've got is Daniel Rich. Look at that spoil with the left hand. That goes 25 metres, and Lachie Neale's there for the crumbs. So it wasn't just the defenders that did it. It was whoever was in the position. Their wingers get back hard. McCluggage and Robinson get back really hard to support the defence. So, gee, they're a different side when Harris Andrews is in there.
And just the 5 marks inside 50 for the Tigers. They chose not to play Tom Lynch.
I'm actually okay with not selecting him. I've got a thing about selecting injured and underdone players in finals, and we saw an example of that with West Coast tonight. So I think it was the smart call, and I still think Richmond can go the long way around. I know they have to come to Adelaide if they get through, which they will next week, you would think. But I still think they're in a reasonable position to still be able to challenge for this premiership, and even more so if Lynch comes back in with no risk of that hammy going again.
Well, speaking of the power, they're waiting for that winner of Richmond or St Kilda next week. It was built off the back of fanatical pressure against Geelong. Kane, you love this pressure from some of these young guys.
I did. It was amazing to be there and to see this live, and to see second-year players like Butters doing this, and some of their youngsters and the impact they have. They've got a great mix between youth and experience, but not many people get Dangerfield. He bounced off Burn Jones, but Robbie Gray was there. Plus 13 in tackles, Port Adelaide, where I've never seen them tackle like this. Maybe not in their history. I mean, the ferocity of which they tackled and took Geelong down and made them panic from defence. I mean, Geelong have been so sound with the ball from their back half this year. They just weren't. They panicked. They made some really silly skill errors that cost them goals, and they second-guessed themselves, and they're really quick to shift the pressure to their opposition as a result of this. And Zach Butters, he's a special player, and that's the goal from Latham. So their smalls had an impact, and it really was a difference in the game, I thought, on Thursday night.
The power put Geelong away in that third quarter, and they built up a wall. Geelong just couldn't break through. Take us through some of this vision, because Hamish Hartlett was huge when the game was on the line.
Oh, it's great vision. You'll see him take 4 intercept marks here in this quarter in the space of about 6 minutes, Hamish Hartlett. And they were so worried about Tom Hawkins, clearly. So they let that Geelong small defender come up to the stoppage, and Hartlett says, well, you're not really in a dangerous position, so I'm just going to drop off you, and we'll highlight him. Watch how quick he is to shift his feet and move. Watch how he adjusts. He's back, he's forward, he's sideways, and he just puts himself in such a dangerous position. Now, the reason he's able to do that, because of Port Adelaide's defence. They slow Geelong down, they make them kick long down the line, and Hartlett just positioned himself with all that experience and his ability to come in the air. He's had a fantastic season, Hamish Hartlett. He took some time to find a position. Was he wing? Was he midfield, forward? He's been a great defender for them. I know he's getting towards veteran stages now, but I thought he was the best player on the ground by a mile on Thursday night.
Looked like a completely different defence from what Geelong served up against the Power back in round 12. And the Cats could have put them away early, really, Kane. In that first half, they had plenty of chance in front of goal. Tom Hawkins finished the game with 0 goals, 5, albeit a couple from tough angles.
Yeah, this was a big one too, early on in the game from Stanley. I thought he played pretty well, Stanley, coming to the side. But, I mean, we speak about all sorts of stats and forward half turnovers and stoppage goals and all sorts of things. Often, finals comes down to this, as simple as it is. And credit to Trent McKenzie, did a good job on Tom Hawkins, and a couple of times made him lead wide. But, I mean, Tom Hawkins kicks 9.5 out of 10 of these, doesn't he, usually? And he didn't for whatever reason. And you question whether Geelong, they shrivel up in finals. I know Chris Scott labelled that criticism as lazy, but how else do you explain that their performance is altered when the pressure rises? Now that, if you want to use choking, if you want to use struggle under pressure, is a history building up. And, you know, Tom Hawkins, we saw that ridiculous snap on the left foot earlier. That one, you don't blame him for doing that, but he rushed it. and they just don't perform in finals under pressure. Now, you can call it choking, you can come up for a name, whatever you like, but their record speaks for itself.
Well, that is wither under the opposition's pressure. They're now 4 wins from 16 finals since the 2011 flag. And Chris Scott said it was lazy, so we dug a bit deeper, Kane. Have a look at these individual quarters from their last 7 finals. And it's a common trend. The one quarter, when Geelong are put under the heat, they just don't stand up.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? So that just those lapses in big games. Now, once again, like Richmond, I still think they will win next week and progress deeper, but they just make it so hard for themselves with their record in that qualifying final. And, you know, I know Chris Scott, some would say he's inherited that premiership in 2011 and his record is extraordinary. Now, I don't think, you know, his position is under any pressure with this, regardless of what happens this week. But there's an issue there that I don't think he can brush off as lazy criticism. I would have much rather him come out on the front foot in that media conference and say, look, the record speaks for itself. We know it's an issue. At the right time, we will try and address it. Now our focus is on next week, but we're bitterly disappointed with what we served up from a pretty young Port Adelaide side who exposed one of the oldest AFL sides we've ever seen.
4-12 in all finals since 2011 and just 1-7 in finals for Geelong in the first week since that 2011 flag. The big watch this week on Joel Selwood with his finger. He's gone in for surgery. Let's have a look at the upcoming games. The semi-finals have been fixtured. Geelong and Collingwood will be on the Saturday night, winner to play Brisbane. And Kane, that Richmond-St Kilda game, that'll kick off next week on Friday night. Interestingly, that game has been scheduled for Metricon Stadium, despite the Gabba with the bigger crowd being available.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that because the reason, I think, as you pointed out on social media, that Geelong haven't been allowed to play their home finals at home is to get a bigger crowd at the MCG. Now, I've always thought that was unfair. So the AFL has allowed that. And I'm surprised that Richmond have chose to play at Metricon, considering, you know, the record at the Gap is pretty strong and the grand final is going to be played there should they make it a few weeks later. So, and they're a good wet weather side as well, which you'd think the Gabba is going to be slippery again, as it has been for most of the year. So, yeah, I was a little bit shocked that they aren't playing it at the Gabba and have chose Metricon.
Kane can't wait for those 2 semi-finals kicking off on Friday. But before that, don't forget, on Tuesday night, the NAB AFL Women's Draft. Join Nat Edwards, Sarah Black and Melissa Hickey for our next batch of AFLW stars. They'll be named and they'll be joining all the clubs on Tuesday night. The comprehensive coverage is available from 7 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday night right here on afl.com.au and the AFLW Facebook page. Can't wait for that. To our one more thing, Kane, it was great to see. I think that one of the best things across the weekend with the crowd, and we had people back at the footy at all venues. Charlie Dixon acquainted himself nicely.
Yeah, he was stiff to be seated next to a couple of Geelong supporters as well who weren't happy with his company, but he saw the funny side of it, and great to see the players enjoying themselves at this time of year.
And the French Open is on right now, Kane. The defending champion, she's in the crowd with a beer watching the footy. How good's that?
How Australian is that? She's still the number 1 player in the world. I think Ash Barty loves her Tigers. She would have been a bit flat after that result.
We shall get another chance to watch them next week at Metricon Stadium. Kane Corns, thanks for that. I'll let you get back to your Twitter notifications.
What a weekend. See you next week.